Welcome agents to Shadow Gaming. So I did want to start off with a few highlights from the state of the game, not much, but of course it all starts with the M1A. So it's now being reverted back after a 40% nerf to it, to its original base damage, and I'm really happy for that because they failed to buff all the other weapons or the player or nerf the NPC health and damage output enough. So there was no reason for it, and I'm glad that they actually addressed that they apologized for it and that it was their mistake. So that's good and all. That's a start. And we also had missing striker knee pads. I'm not sure how things like this happen, but for anyone that was running a striker set, you were completely screwed for I think like 6 hours or so. I could be wrong on that, but I was playing from when the patch dropped and finished maintenance, I think around 3:30 in the morning, all the way until like 11 in the morning, and that's around the time that the emergency patch came in for the missing striker pads. So that's roughly 8 hours where your striker build was just done for. I'm glad they fixed it, but these kind of mistakes cannot happen. So back to the M1A. We need weapons like this to take on the more difficult content that makes it more fun. But I believe that a 40 to 50% across the board buff to our damage would help us a lot more than just using this one outlier weapon. And even if it was to be nerfed, it should have maybe gotten 15% or less. It's a bolt action rifle, and it should not be dealing such low amounts of damage. But at least they're fixing it. There's no timestamp on that, but hopefully it's sooner than later. And really, I don't even understand how they can't just fix it right away. I understand that I don't work there, but this should be basically fixed overnight in my opinion. I don't believe they needed the client update patch to actually do the nerf. But anyway, I do believe that we do need a buff to our base damage period, and maybe 40 to 50% is too much, but you get what I mean. Or nerf the enemy health to a lower amount that is consistent with how much damage we output, but at the same time the enemies do need to deal less damage. Once Warlords of New York dropped, the enemies became bullet sponges, and this has been unacceptable since the start of Division 2. The main thing that the Division 2 had when it released was the only real bullet sponges were the enemies that were tanks that had pieces of armor you had to blast off. Now, basically all of the NPCs take nearly as much as they used to with the tanks to kill. And of course, that's with a much more optimized build. If you just slap on a build and try to take on even challenging content, I think, maybe heroic, you are never going to do enough damage to complete even one mission. So this rips the fun out of the game and makes you even question why you're still playing. The game mechanics themselves are so addicting and fun, but this problem will eventually make players leave. I understand having a boss or named elite taking so much damage, but not any other enemy archetype in the game. Agents want to use more than just what is the strongest as well. I know I do, and subscribers of mine and people I've spoken with in game and out of game, they mostly all talk about wanting to use SMGs, assault rifles, marksman rifles, and so on. But with the M1A being so powerful, they simply don't really run anything else when the M1A is available. I recently actually just talked to a friend on Discord that just kind of isn't having fun with TU9 right now because he wants to run SMGs, and I don't blame him. I didn't really have a really good build for him. I have a decent chatterbox build that was rolled back during the ban, but even then, it was mostly meant to clear challenging content with solo. You could clear heroic content solo, but when you have the M1A, there was really no reason for it. It is pretty good in PvP as well, but for the most part, I was clearing challenging missions solo with it. When the developers see how many people are using the M1A though, they should address the biggest concern of why. The content is simply too difficult for most players to engage and complete when the enemies hit way too hard and our weapons are not doing the damage that it takes to take them out right away. The time to kill is too long and ours is way too short. Ever since Warlords of New York dropped, not only did they become bullet sponges, but they shred us to pieces and punish us so heavily for being out of cover. And it's simply not fun. It's tedious to shoot an enemy that runs as fast as Usain Bolt, dodges bullets, and tanks the ones it does take, and deals more than twice what we do. And if Massive wants a good cover-based looter shooter, then don't have so many mechanics in the game that forces us out of cover. This isn't even enjoyable in a 4-man group. When you're constantly being forced out of cover, especially with Black Tusk or the Cleaners, or pretty much any other NPC in the game, they force you out of cover so much, there needs to be some sort of middle ground. But in my opinion, they are not really getting to the balancing of the game just yet, but I do believe they will. They are just taking too much time to get it done. The working from home thing might get people empathetic, but it doesn't for me and most others. They simply cannot release content and balancing if it isn't right. Take your time and do it right. The pandemic is not the reason the game is a mess right now. It's their work. And they need to address and not get their ideas from people besides streamers. People like Widdz and like Butter and so on, they don't make the game better. They make it better for themselves. And I have nothing against them. This is Massive Studios' fault for making this fatal mistake. But ultimately, I believe if they are going to fix and balance the game, they should not be pushing out so many updates so quickly when you seem to be doing more damage than you are fixing the game. I have noticed since before the release of Warlords of New York, the game was not really that bad. To me, this game was more fun when it was in Title Update 7. I still love to log in every day and collect loot and trash the enemies. It was fun. It mostly just needed more content and the Gear 2.0 system, and a little buff to challenge and heroic, and the addition of legendary mode as well. But they made the game so much more difficult through bullet sponginess. This was never supposed to happen, and it's a horrible artificial way to increase difficulty with little to no hard work. You just can't have this game have bullet sponges anymore. They seem to have learned nothing from the Division 1 when we cried out to get rid of the bullet sponges for 2 years. When they released the Division 2, the bullet sponginess of enemies seemed to have gone away at first. This was great, and only sponginess that really was felt was on tanks, doggos, and anything that was a heavy. But then Title Update 8 and Warlords of New York was released, and this added difficulty in the form of ridiculousness and astounding. When Legendary for the Division 1 came out, it was very difficult to beat, and still is. Me and Gamey Daddy almost finished one weeks ago, and it was really difficult, even with all the classified sets to play with. But it wasn't really their health that was the problem, it was their lethality that made them so hard to beat, and their tactics the most. For some reason, they have decided to slowly reduce NPC health and damage over the past month, but never enough to do it justice. If they could find a sweet spot, we are all going to love this game again. To do that, we need all weapons and gear buffed, mostly just the weapons though. There are so many weapons to use in this game, and so many of them are instantly deconstructed or sold because they simply do not do what the tier 1 weapons can. If we have a buff to our weapons and a nerf to the enemies, this will make the game great again. But there is no reason to release more content if this game is not ever going to be balanced correctly. And where are the skill damage builds like the 4-piece hardwired with BTSU gloves? This game is so close to being great, but the main problem I have with it, and have been saying for a while now, is the NPC scaling, solo and in groups. Their damage output and our damage output. If this gets to the sweet spot it needs to be in, then we just need them to release more content at that point. There's no need to balance things for PvE and PvP at the same time as well. They need to always be separate. When I go into the Dark Zone, I know what my PvP stats are. I understand things are different, and everyone else does too. You can test your builds out in PvP. You don't need to nerf and buff things when they directly affect two entirely different parts of the game. And exotics need to be best in slot as well. They should be legendary weapons and gear. They're extremely situational, and this makes creating builds around it nearly impossible. And they're so hard to collect and find, I don't understand why they have taken such a nerf to all of them. They need to stand out more. They are only collectibles to me at this point, most of them are. The Diamondback needs to hit harder, or have more ammo, or just work where the target is somewhere in your field of view. An overcharge shouldn't be this quick 15-second proc It again is just way too situational and has a huge cooldown. At least show us what you did back before Warlords of New York, when the flame turret they had on the state of the game had this gigantic range and damage that melted the NPCs so quickly. Why is this not a thing after they showed us that? It should have been left in the game like this. To get to overcharge, you need to completely build into it. And for now, skill builds are entirely status effect, crowd control builds. You cannot build around skill damage and wreck a heroic mission by yourself and enjoy it. This game needs to be difficult, but more importantly, more fun. They are not letting us be powerful, and this is extremely important in games, especially when we have worked so hard for so many hours to build our builds and learn game mechanic skills. The build diversity in this game right now is horrible too. There are a ton of people running random things, but they don't really work very well. And in random matchmaking, I usually end up unable to even finish a mission because these wacky builds are not viable for this difficult of content. I do give them credit for apologizing for the M1A nerf on today's state of the game. They are hopefully finally owning up to their own mistakes, and I hope this is a trend when they do mess up so badly. The nerf should have come with all other weapons being buffed. I stated this in my Title Update 9 discussion earlier this week, and I stick to it. Overall, the state of this game so far is in disarray. They seem to have these massive egos where they entirely stopped listening to their community and just went for it with what they want. But they play on normal or story mode, or run with Ubisoft star players, and even Hamish was using the M1A with focus. What does that tell you? Even the community manager uses the strongest weapon in the game because it's fun and enjoyable to be powerful in video games. If we are weak after so much dedicated time and effort, what's the point? We cannot keep struggling through this game and constantly having issues that are probably making many players either uninstall or wait for the next update where there might be some good news. The people who come in droves and bought Warlords of New York, they mostly have probably left by now or are awaiting a new patch with some good news. The game isn't dead, but not fixing this game fast enough, it surely will be soon, that's for sure. I hope that they continue to own up to their mistakes and not do something so outlandish like nerfing the most powerful and used weapon in the game and leaving us to fend for ourselves in the wild with Terminator NPCs. And they even nerf the enemy NPCs again, but it's so slight. It took me 3 or 4 missions to notice it. Anyway, that's it for my weekly discussion. I am starting to get more and more bored with this game and playing it less and less. I still love it, and I can never put it down, but my playtime hours have definitely decreased, even with so much love for this game. I do hope and pray for it to get better, but let me know what your thoughts are on the state of the game and how you feel right now even playing the Division 2. Do you feel powerful enough after all the work you have put into this game? Do you feel like there is enough build diversity for you to pick from? Do the NPCs feel good where they are at, or do you think that they need more tuning down? I also would like to show you something from the community that stood out to me this week, so here it is. I have been saying this for over a week or so now and believe it to still be true. Let me know in the comments section below what you think, and I will see you agents in the next video. Thank you.